The steady hum of the Horizon's engines filled the bridge as Captain James Walker stared at the blinking red light on his command console. After 15 years of deep space exploration, he had learned that unexpected signals usually meant trouble. The distress beacon's pulse seemed to echo his own heartbeat, steady yet somehow unsettling. "How far?" he asked, his voice cutting through the quiet murmur of the bridge crew. "About 6 hours at standard speed, sir," replied Tom, the young navigation officer. His fingers danced across the holographic controls, bringing up a detailed star map. "It's coming from an unmapped sector." Walker nodded slowly. Humanity had been exploring space for 5 decades now, meeting various alien species, most of them peaceful. These days, finding an unmapped sector was rare. That made the distress signal even more suspicious. "What do our alien friends say about this region?" Walker turned to his first officer, Mary, who was already checking the shared database, a gift from their allies, the Blue Giants, as humans call them. "Nothing, sir. It's listed as empty space. No colonies, no trade routes, nothing of interest." Mary frowned at her screen. "That's odd. Usually, the database is very detailed." Walker stood up from his command chair, walking to the large observation window. The stars stretched endlessly before them, each one holding its own mysteries. 50 years ago, humans had dreamed of being alone in the universe. Now, they knew better. Space was full of life, full of wonders, and sometimes full of dangers. "Set course," he ordered. "But bring up the shields. Something doesn't feel right." The next 6 hours passed in tense silence. The crew of the Horizon was experienced. They had handled first contact situations, trade negotiations, and even the occasional space pirate. But this was different. The empty sector seemed to swallow their ship, making them feel small and vulnerable. When they finally reached the source of the signal, the scene before them made even the veteran crew members gasp. The wreckage of a massive ship floated in space, its hull torn apart like paper. It wasn't just destroyed, it was shattered, pieces scattered across thousands of kilometers. "Life signs?" Walker asked, though he already knew the answer. "None, sir," replied the sensor officer. "But the technology. I've never seen anything like it. This ship was far more advanced than anything in our database." Walker felt a chill run down his spine. In all their years of exploration, they had never encountered technology that surpassed the Blue Giants. Whatever had destroyed this ship had to be incredibly powerful. "Sir," Tom's voice was urgent, multiple objects approaching at high speed. Before Walker could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Ships appeared, if you could call them ships. They looked more like living creatures made of metal, their surfaces shifting and changing like liquid mercury. "Shields at maximum," Walker shouted, but he knew it might not be enough. These things, whatever they were, had destroyed something far more advanced than the Horizon. The first blast hit them like a hammer, making the entire ship groan. Red warning lights flashed everywhere as systems struggled to compensate. "Return fire," Walker ordered, knowing their weapons might be useless but unwilling to go down without a fight. The Horizon's lasers seemed to bend around the strange ships, barely leaving a mark. Another hit rocked the ship, and Walker heard the distinctive sound of hull plates tearing. "We can't take another hit like that," Mary reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. "The engines are still working. We can run." Walker hated running, but he knew they had to warn Earth. Whatever these things were, they were unlike anything humanity had encountered before. "Get us out of here," he commanded. "Maximum speed, and download everything we can about those ships." As the Horizon turned to escape, Walker caught one last glimpse of the strange attackers. They weren't following. Instead, they were methodically destroying what remained of the wrecked ship, erasing all evidence of its existence. "This isn't over," Walker muttered as they jumped to safety. "This is just the beginning." He didn't know how right he was. Humanity had just encountered its greatest threat, and the galaxy would never be the same. The emergency meeting room at Earth Defense Command was packed. Captain Walker stood before the gathered military leaders and scientists, his uniform still showing burn marks from the attack. The images from the Horizon's cameras played behind him, showing the strange ships that had nearly destroyed his vessel. "They're unlike anything we've encountered," Walker said, his voice grave. "Our strongest weapons barely scratched them, and based on the data we collected, they're systematically hunting down advanced civilizations." Admiral Brown, an old veteran of Earth's first space conflicts, leaned forward. "How do you know they're hunting civilizations? Maybe it was a random attack." Walker pressed a button, and new images appeared on the screen. The Horizon's computers had decoded some of the data they collected during their escape. The images showed similar attacks on other worlds, dozens of them. "Look at the dates," Walker pointed out. "These attacks follow a pattern. They're moving through the galaxy, sector by sector, destroying any civilization that reaches a certain level of technology." The room fell silent. Earth had faced threats before, but nothing like this. The strange ships, now called the Swarm by Earth's analysts, were methodically eliminating any species that showed too much progress. "There's more," said Lisa, the Horizon's chief scientist. She had spent the last week studying the attack data. "We think they're not just ships. They're some kind of biological machines, living metal, and they seem to follow strict patterns in their attacks." She showed more footage of the battle. "See how they move. It's always the same sequence: surround, disable, destroy. They never deviate, never improvise." Admiral Brown's eyes lit up at this information. "Are you saying they can't handle unexpected situations?" "Exactly," Walker replied. "When we escaped, we did something they didn't expect. We fired our engines in an irregular pattern. It confused them long enough for us to get away." The room buzzed with conversation. Earth's top minds were already seeing possibilities. If these swarm ships couldn't handle unpredictability, that was a weakness humans could use. Dr. Roberts, Earth's leading weapons developer, spoke up next. "Our regular weapons won't work against their armor, but maybe we don't need bigger guns. Maybe we need something chaotic." Walker nodded. During the escape, he had noticed something else. Their armor seems to adapt to regular energy patterns, but when our damaged engines started releasing random energy bursts, it disrupted their shields. "How long do we have?" asked Admiral Brown. Lisa pulled up a map of the galaxy. Red dots showed confirmed swarm attacks. "Based on their movement pattern, they'll reach our sector in about 6 months." The room erupted in worried murmurs. 6 months wasn't much time to prepare for a threat this serious. But humans had always been good at working under pressure. "I have a proposal," Walker said, silencing the room. "We need to think differently. These things destroy advanced civilizations because they're predictable. Big fleets, powerful weapons, standard tactics. That's what they expect. But humans, we're anything but predictable." He showed one last piece of footage. The moment when the Horizon's damaged engines had created random energy patterns. The swarm ships had actually moved away from the chaos. "They're perfect machines," Walker continued. "And that's their weakness. They can't handle random actions. They can't adapt to chaos. But that's what humans do best. We improvise, we break patterns, we do the unexpected." Admiral Brown stood up, his decision made. "Captain Walker, I'm putting you in charge of our defense planning. We have 6 months to show these machines that they picked the wrong species to hunt." As the meeting ended, Walker looked at the image of the swarm ships one last time. They were terrifying, yes, but they were about to learn something important. In all the galaxy, no species was better at causing chaos than humans. The real question was, would 6 months be enough time to turn humanity's unpredictability into a weapon? Commander Ann Miller watched from the observation deck as another test ship exploded. The pilot had ejected safely, but the new Chaos drive they were testing had torn itself apart. Again. "That's the fifth failure today," said Dr. Roberts, standing beside her. "But each explosion is teaching us something new." The Chaos Drive was humanity's latest weapon against the swarm, an engine that created completely random energy patterns. The problem was keeping it stable enough not to destroy the ship carrying it. "We don't have time for more failures," Miller said, checking her watch. 4 months until the swarm reaches our territory. Show me what we learned." In the lab below, screens showed data from the failed test. The energy patterns were exactly what they wanted, completely unpredictable. But controlling that chaos was proving difficult. "Look here," Dr. Roberts pointed to a particular reading. "The randomness is perfect. The swarm's systems won't be able to adapt to it. We just need to contain it better." Miller nodded. As head of the special training program, she had spent the last 2 months teaching pilots how to fight unpredictably. Now they needed ships that could match that unpredictability. "What about the new fleet?" she asked, turning to look at the shipyard through another window. Dozens of ships were being built, but they looked nothing like regular military vessels. "The designs are finished," Roberts replied. "Small, fast, and each one slightly different from the others. No patterns for the swarm to learn from." Miller smiled. The new ships broke every rule of traditional space combat. Instead of big, powerful warships, they were building smaller vessels that could move in unexpected ways. Some spun while fighting. Others could split into pieces and rejoin, and all of them were designed to be unpredictable. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message. The swarm had been spotted attacking one of humanity's outer colonies earlier than expected. "They're testing us," Miller said, already moving toward the command center. "Show me the colony's defenses." The colony had been prepared. Following Miller's new tactics, they had hidden small ships among the asteroids and space debris. Each ship was equipped with prototype Chaos Drives. On the main screen, they watched as the swarm ships approached the colony. They moved in their usual perfect formation, expecting an easy victory. They didn't expect what happened next. Human ships burst from their hiding places, moving in random patterns that made no tactical sense. The Chaos Drives, while not perfect, created energy fields that confused the swarm's targeting systems. "Look at that," Roberts pointed excitedly. "They can't predict where our ships will go because there's no pattern to follow." The swarm ships tried to adapt, but every human vessel moved differently. Some spun while firing, others flew in zigzag patterns, and a few seemed to move completely randomly. Miller watched proudly as her trained pilots put their lessons to use. "Humans are naturally chaotic," she said. "We just needed to embrace it." The battle ended quickly. The swarm ships, unable to handle the randomness of the attack, retreated. It was humanity's first victory against them. "Send this footage to all our colonies," Miller ordered, "and get me Captain Walker. He needs to see this." Later that day, Miller stood before Earth's Defense Council, presenting the results of the battle. "The Chaos Drives aren't perfect yet," she explained, "but combined with our unpredictable tactics, they work. The swarm can't handle random actions. They can't adapt to things that don't follow patterns." Admiral Brown looked pleased. "How soon can we have a full fleet ready?" 3 months, Roberts answered. "Maybe less now that we know the drives work." Miller looked at the battle footage one last time. "The swarm thinks they're hunting us," she said, "but they're about to learn that humans are the most dangerous prey they've ever faced." The real fight hadn't even started yet, but humanity had found its edge. Sometimes the best weapon isn't the biggest or most powerful. It's the one the enemy can't predict. Captain Walker's ship, now renamed Shadow, slipped silently through space. The new stealth systems worked perfectly. No regular sensors could detect them. But they weren't hunting regular enemies. "Swarm outpost ahead," whispered Tom, although whispering in space made no difference. Old habits died hard. 3 defender ships. Walker nodded, watching the strange biomechanical ships patrol their territory. 2 months of hit-and-run attacks had taught them a lot about the enemy. Now it was time to test a new theory. "Launch the drones," Walker ordered. "Random pattern Delta." 5 small drones shot out from the shadow, each moving in completely different ways. Some spun, others zigzagged, and one seemed to be malfunctioning. But it was all part of the plan. The swarm ships immediately moved to attack the drones, following their usual perfect formation. That's when Walker sprung his trap. "Now," he commanded. The Shadow's new chaos drive roared to life, creating a field of unpredictable energy around the ship. At the same time, they launched their new weapon, a modified probe that could interface with swarm technology. The enemy ships, distracted by the drones and confused by the chaos field, didn't notice the probe until it was too late. It attached to one of their ships and began downloading data. "We're in their systems," the science officer shouted. "Sir, you need to see this." Walker's eyes widened as he read the data. The swarm ships weren't just machines. They were living computers. Each one had organic parts grown around mechanical cores. They were built to be perfect warriors, but their rigid programming was their weakness. They can't understand chaos because they're programmed for perfect order, Walker realized. Their biological parts try to adapt, but their mechanical cores can't handle random variables. A warning alarm interrupted his thoughts. The swarm ships had recovered and were attacking, but their movements seemed different. Slower, more hesitant. "They're trying to create random patterns," Tom reported. "But look, they can't. Their movements are still following mathematical sequences." Walker smiled. The swarm was trying to copy human tactics, but they couldn't truly be random. Their programming wouldn't allow it. "Hit them with everything we've got," he ordered. No patterns, no formation, pure chaos. The Shadow's crew had trained for this. Each weapon fired at different intervals. Each burst of speed came at random times. The chaos drive spun up and down unpredictably, creating a constantly changing energy field. The swarm ships couldn't cope. Their perfect programming, designed to counter any normal attack, failed against pure randomness. One by one, they fell to the Shadow's attacks. But the real victory wasn't destroying the ships. It was the data they'd stolen. Walker immediately sent it to Earth Command. Hours later, he stood in a holographic meeting with Commander Miller and Earth's leaders. "They're biological machines," Walker explained, "created to be perfect soldiers. But perfection is their weakness. They literally can't understand or adapt to chaos." Miller nodded, adding, "Our latest battles prove it. When we attack with random patterns, their response time drops by 60%. They're programmed to find patterns. When there aren't any, they start to fail." Admiral Brown looked pleased. "Other species are noticing our success. The blue giants have requested our help. They want to learn our tactics." "Teach them," Walker said. "The more chaos we can create, the better. These things have been terrorizing the galaxy because everyone tried to fight them with order and strategy. Time to show them why that was a mistake." As the meeting ended, Walker looked at the image of the captured swarm data. They'd feared these perfect killing machines, but now they understood. Sometimes perfection itself is a weakness, and nobody did imperfect better than humans. The real question was, now that they knew the swarm's true nature, what else would they discover about these strange biomechanical beings? Commander Miller stood in Earth's largest training facility, watching as alien pilots tried to learn human chaos tactics. It wasn't going well. "You're thinking too much," she shouted into the simulator room. "Stop trying to plan your moves. Just react." The blue giant pilot, nearly 8 feet tall and blue-skinned, looked confused. Like most advanced species, they believed in careful planning and perfect execution. Teaching them to embrace chaos was proving difficult. "I don't understand," the pilot said. "How can we fight without a plan?" Miller sighed. Then she had an idea. "Come with me," she said. "I want to show you something." She led the alien pilots to Earth's historical archive. On the screens, she pulled up videos of old Earth sports and games. "Watch how these humans move," She pointed to a basketball game. See how they react to the moment. They have basic rules, yes, but every game is different. Every move is based on what's happening right then. The aliens watched, fascinated. They saw surfers riding unpredictable waves, skateboarders performing random tricks, dancers improvising to music. This is how we live, Miller explained. Humans don't just accept chaos, we enjoy it. Now we need to teach you to do the same. Back in the simulator, the training changed. Instead of teaching strict tactics, Miller had the aliens play games. They learned to surf solar winds, to dance through asteroid fields, to play space tag with changing rules. Slowly, they began to understand. Meanwhile, on the other side of the facility, Captain Walker was meeting with representatives from a dozen different alien species. All of them had lost worlds to the swarm. All of them wanted to learn humanity's secrets. Your weapons, a reptilian ambassador asked. They are very advanced. Walker shook his head. Our weapons are simple. Our strength is here. He tapped his head. We think differently. We embrace the unexpected. He showed them footage from recent battles. Human ships flying in ways that made no tactical sense, yet somehow working together. Chaos drives creating random energy fields that confuse swarm sensors. Pilots making decisions that no computer could predict. The swarm expects perfection, Walker explained. They can't understand anything else. That's why they've beaten you all before. You fought perfectly, predictably. But humans, we're naturally unpredictable. The aliens began to understand. For years, they had tried to become more perfect, more organized. But against the swarm, these things were weaknesses. In the following weeks, Earth became the center of the greatest military training program in galaxy history. Alien ships arrived by the hundreds, their crews eager to learn human chaos tactics. Miller's training methods spread across the galaxy. Species that had hidden from the swarm for years began to fight back. And with each victory, they learned more about their enemy. The swarm is adapting, Walker reported during a council meeting. They're trying to create countermeasures against our random attacks. But they can't change their basic nature. They're still bound by their programming. Admiral Brown nodded. Our alien allies report success across 12 sectors. The swarm is being pushed back for the first time in history. But Miller added, looking at the latest battle reports, they're gathering their forces. Intelligence suggests they're planning something big. The room fell quiet. Everyone knew what it meant. The swarm was preparing for a major counterattack. Let them come, Walker said firmly. The more they try to predict us, the more they'll fail. And now we're not fighting alone. As if to prove his point, a new group of alien ships arrived in Earth's orbit. Their crews were ready to learn humanity's way of war, the way of controlled chaos. The greatest fleet in galaxy history was forming. But would it be enough for what was coming? The combined fleet of 2,000 ships hung in space like a swarm of fireflies. Human vessels flew alongside alien ships of all shapes and sizes. Each one was equipped with a chaos drive, and every crew had learned to embrace unpredictability. Captain Walker stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Shadow, now 3 times larger than before. Commander Miller's voice came through the comm system. All ships report ready. The swarm's home system is just ahead. This was it, the push to their enemy's core. Months of battles had led them here, following the swarm's retreat back to their source. Show me the scans, Walker ordered. A holographic display lit up, showing thousands of swarm ships protecting their home system. But something was different about these ships. They were larger, more complex, and seemed to pulse with strange energy. They've been upgrading, Miller observed from her command ship, trying to become even more perfect. Walker smiled. The more the swarm tried to perfect themselves, the more vulnerable they became to chaos. That was the lesson they'd learned over months of fighting. Begin the attack, he ordered. Random pattern Omega. The Allied fleet broke apart, each ship choosing its own path. Some spun as they flew, others zigzagged unpredictably. Chaos drives activated at different times, creating a storm of random energy that confused the swarm's sensors. The swarm responded with perfect formation, their new ships moving in complex but predictable patterns. They had learned some tricks, but they still couldn't break free of their programming. Now, Walker commanded. The battle exploded into action. Human ships darted between swarm vessels, their random movements making them almost impossible to hit. Alien allies who had once feared the swarm now attacked boldly, using the chaos tactics they'd learned. But the swarm had prepared. Their new ships released clouds of small drones, trying to create their own version of unpredictability. It wasn't truly random. The drones still followed patterns, but it was dangerous. They're learning. Miller's voice crackled through the comm. But they can only imitate chaos, not create it. Walker watched as a group of blue giant ships spun through the drone cloud, their chaos drives creating interference that confused the small machines. Meanwhile, Earth ships darted forward, pushing deeper into the swarm's defenses. Then Walker saw it, a massive structure at the heart of the system. "That's their control center," he said. "Everything we've learned about the swarm suggests they're controlled from a central point. That has to be it." The Allies pressed their attack, but the closer they got to the core, the harder the swarm fought. Ships were lost on both sides. The random tactics that had worked so well before were less effective against these upgraded enemies. "We need something new," Miller said. "Something they absolutely cannot predict." Walker looked at his tactical display, then made a decision that no military commander in history would consider sane. "All ships, power down your weapons," he ordered. "What?" several alien commanders asked at once. "Trust me," Walker said. "The most unpredictable thing we can do right now is stop fighting." The Allied ships powered down their weapons but kept their chaos drives running. The swarm ships, programmed to counter attacks, suddenly had nothing to counter. Their perfect formations faltered. "Now," Walker shouted. "All ships, random jumps toward the core. Don't plot a course, just jump." It was completely crazy. Ships jumped in all directions, their chaos drives creating a web of random energy. The swarm's defense grid, designed to predict and counter normal attacks, couldn't handle the madness. A gap opened in their defenses, small, but enough. "Commander Miller," Walker called, "take your strike team in. We'll keep them confused out here." As Miller's ships raced toward the control center, Walker smiled. The swarm had spent eons perfecting themselves, becoming the ultimate killing machines. But against human chaos, even perfection had its limits. The real question was, what would they find in that control center? Commander Miller's strike team moved through the massive control center, their footsteps echoing in the strange biomechanical corridors. The walls pulsed with the same living metal they'd seen in swarm ships, but here it felt different, older, more aware. "Look at these markings," Miller said, studying the walls. "They're ancient, far older than any civilization we know." Captain Walker, who had joined the strike team after securing the space around the facility, moved closer to examine them. "These aren't just markings," he realized. "They're code. The whole structure is one giant living computer." As they reached the central chamber, they found something unexpected. Instead of weapons or defense systems, they saw massive data cores rising from floor to ceiling. In the center, a holographic display showed the history of the swarm. "It's a message," their science officer said, working to decode it. "From the creators of the swarm." The message played, telling a story that left them stunned. The swarm had been created millions of years ago by a species that sought perfection. They built the ultimate weapons, ships that could think, adapt, and evolve. But they made one crucial mistake. They programmed them to eliminate any threat to perfection, Walker said, reading the ancient text. But the swarm decided that all advanced civilizations were potential threats. "Even their creators?" Miller asked. "Especially their creators," Walker nodded. The swarm turned on them first, seeing their creativity and unpredictability as flaws that needed to be eliminated. Miller looked around the chamber. So they've been following their programming ever since, destroying any civilization that might introduce chaos into their perfect order. The team moved deeper into the facility, finding their way to the main control core. Here they could feel the pulse of every swarm ship in the galaxy, all connected to this central brain. We could destroy it, one of the team members suggested. End the swarm forever. But Walker had another idea. The swarm isn't evil, he said. They're following their programming. But what if we could change that programming? Miller understood immediately. Instead of destroying them, we reprogram them. Turn them from destroyers into protectors. Working quickly, their technical team began to interface with the control core. Years of studying swarm technology had prepared them for this moment. But the swarm's defenses weren't making it easy. The system is fighting us, the tech officer reported. It sees our changes as imperfections. That's when Miller had an idea. Stop trying to make perfect changes, she said. Do it randomly. Let's show them that imperfection can be beautiful. They began introducing random variations into the code, creating patterns that were beautiful in their chaos. Like jazz music or abstract art, it had structure but wasn't predictable. The swarm's resistance began to fade. Slowly, the living machines started to understand something new. That perfection wasn't about eliminating chaos, but about finding harmony with it. Hours later, Walker stood before the combined fleet, announcing their victory. But it wasn't the victory anyone had expected. The swarm is no longer our enemy, he explained. They've evolved. Their new programming accepts that the universe needs both order and chaos to thrive. Across the galaxy, swarm ships began helping the civilizations they had once hunted. Their perfect efficiency was now used to rebuild, protect, and explore. They had become guardians instead of destroyers. Miller watched from the control center as the changes spread. Do you think the swarm's creators would be proud? She asked. I think they'd be surprised. Walker smiled. They tried to create perfect weapons. Instead, they created beings capable of learning, growing, and changing. That's a different kind of perfection. As ships from across the galaxy gathered to celebrate, humans and aliens alike marveled at how the greatest threat they had ever faced had become their strongest ally. The swarm had evolved, and with them, the galaxy entered a new age of harmony between order and chaos. The void wasn't filled with terror anymore. Now it was filled with possibility.